Today I am going to talk a little bit about urinary infections in children. Now this sounds very minor or not so important topic, that is it worth talking about, because yes, urinary infection does occur very frequently in children. But the reason why I am talking about is that many times this is a pointer towards very major urinary or genital problems, which can be picked up only on the basis of suspicion and investigations because of this particular urinary infection. Now, how common or not it is, see, in the age group up to 1 year, surprisingly males are more frequently affected by urinary infection than females. But once you go above 1 year, then the ratio reverses and girls are much more, almost 10 to 1 times more common to get infections. Now the risk up to the age of 14 in boys for getting a urinary tract infection in their entire life is only 1%, but in girls it is much higher, 3.5%. And one point is risk of urinary tract infection in uncircumcised boys versus circumcised. The risk is as high as 5 to 20 times more. Now this is why there are certain people who do it for religious purposes is a different thing. But there are people, like in USA at one time there was a massive trend of circumcising all boys who were born within those years, and almost every boy who was born was circumcised at birth, because they found that the risk of recurrent or other urinary infections in these boys as they grew up was much less than in those who were not circumcised. Now they have come down on the aggressiveness with which they were doing circumcision, but still the overall incidence is, see how high it is. 0 to 1 year in girls can be 0.4 to 1%, whereas in boys it is 0.188%, means almost 0.2% in circumcised. But in uncircumcised it is as high as 0.702. So which is much higher than girls, who is 0.4 or 0.1. Second is in the age group 1 to 5 years, in girls it goes up by 0.9 to 1.4%, and in boys it will go up only to 0.1 or 0.2%. Again in school age, if you see, girls is almost as high as 2.3%, but in boys the maximum will be maybe 0.2%. So which is again, as above one age, the year of 1 year, after that girls commonly get urinary tract infection compared to boys. Now how does it occur, and that is probably one of the correlation as to why girls get more than boys, is ascending urethral and bladder. Now if you remember that in girls there is a very short urethra compared to boys. Boys have a longer length of the urethra, one. Number two, the urethral orifice in a girl is very close to the anal orifice, and therefore constipation, loose motions or anything in a small girl, it's easier for that infection to spread from bowel to urinary, because the distance is short and the urethral length is smaller. So for the infection to go in and go up to the bladder and above is much easier in a girl than in a boy. Second is of course hematogenous, which means like any other infection, once the infection bacteria go into the blood through whatever method it can go and focal into the kidney and give rise to urinary infection, which can damage the kidney directly. Lymphatic is another, just like we have blood vessels like arteries and veins, there is a lymphatic supply which takes lymph from all over the body and puts it into the main vein right in the neck. So again, any infection which can be there can go from the lymphatics into the vein, into the blood, and then circulate, go to the kidney and damage the kidney. Direct extension, like if there is a communication between, in a girl, between vagina and the urinary system, you are directly exposing. Or if there is a intestine which is in direct contact with the urinary system, intestine contain a lot of fecal bacteria. Those bacteria can directly access the urinary tract and give rise to urinary infection. And iatrogenic, which is caused by doctors, like we do certain procedures like micturating cystourethrogram, where we put in a small tube into the urethra of the child, male or female, inject contrast, take x-rays, remove the thing, make the child pass urine. All these are invasive procedures. Or if you are doing what is known as a cystoscopy, where we have a rigid scope, where we introduce that through the penis, go inside the urethra, look at the bladder, look at the urethra and come out. That again is an invasive which can lead to infection, which is why whenever we want to do a cystoscopy or an MCU, we always wait for the previous infection, if there is any, to settle down, wait for a week, 2 weeks and then do the procedure. Because in the presence of minor infection, you push this in, the infection is going to flare up and cause more problems. Now what happens because of urinary infection in children? One is direct damage to the kidney, renal parenchyma, giving rise to scarring. Scarring is a process by which the infection which hits one part of the kidney, one or more parts, that part gets damaged so badly that it cannot function. So that part stops functioning. The adjacent kidney, being normal, not affected, keeps on functioning and grows. So what does not grow remains like a pit, which is the scar. So excessively scarred kidney means there have been multiple infections which have caused damage, which have prevented growth in that particular area. Hypertension, we were just talking about that. One of the causes of hypertension in many patients, even older patients, can be due to kidney problems. Either the artery is small or the kidney has been damaged because of reflux, because of obstruction which has not been treated. So all these things are important and they will manifest as what? Simple urinary infection. It is up to us to investigate, to look for the thing, get all the investigations, interpret the investigations and then give a diagnosis and treatment, of course. And of course chronic renal failure. And if this occurs usually when both the kidneys are affected. One kidney is affected, it doesn't matter, the other kidney can take over. But if there is parenchymal damage to both the kidneys, then both the kidneys get damaged, their function goes down, they go into renal failure, transplant is the only option left. What are the risk factors of scarring which follows urinary infection? Is younger age. That's why the first year of age is very difficult if you do not pick up and treat aggressively a simple thing like a urinary infection. It's many times misdiagnosed, not diagnosed, or diagnosed and not adequately treated. Any three of these can cause disaster later on. Delay in antimicrobial therapy. Now this is again another thing which we face when we are doing what we call consultations or OPD, outpatient department. Parents come with the children, they are having signs which suggest urinary infection. So we tell them, get the urine done, come back, in the meanwhile let us start antibiotics. But what they want, no sir, why do you want, let us wait, let us give him only crocin or paracetamol and see if the fever settles down. Or they take 3 days to go and get a urine examination done. In the meanwhile they are not doing anything, they are just giving crocin or paracetamol or one of those things. And by the time they come back there is gross infection, at which time we are not able to do because we have already delayed starting the antimicrobial therapy, and therefore it can lead to gross damage to the kidneys. Recurrent urinary. Now recurrent is a very funny term because recurrence can be of 3 types. One is literally the infection is there, it goes away and it recurs, and we call it recurrent. Sometimes what happens is the infection is there, it decreases but does not totally go, and then it again increases, and you say it has recurred. It has not recurred, it has persisted and it has now again blown up. So it is the fault of the antibiotics or the duration or the type of antibiotic given which has caused. And the last is resistant. So the infection was there, it has never gone away. We assume that the symptoms have gone away, so the infection has gone away. And then again you do the examination and again there is infection and they say, oh, it has recurred. It has not recurred. It is resistant infection which is still persisting. So therefore we have to be careful when we treat urinary infection not to treat it like cough cold. Very often when children come for cough cold, we give paracetamol, we give some decongestant, we give some cough syrup and we say it's okay, there is no problem. Acha, if there is fever, we say okay, give an antibiotic, which is alright, and then we don't bother about it, which is alright. In urinary infection, you cannot have that casual approach in children. I am not talking about adults. Again, presence of vesico-urethral reflux. Now this I will be talking about a little bit more in detail because this is a very important thing to be suspected and therefore diagnosed at a later stage. Reflux is normally, if you see, the urine is formed in the kidneys. It comes into the collecting system which we call the pelvis. It goes through the ureter, which is a tubular structure, opens into the bladder. It is held in the bladder for some time and then it is evacuated out of the body through the urethra. Now this is the normal flow of urine. In some children, the urine from the bladder, instead of going one way out, goes up, either on one side or on both sides. Now this reflux, if not diagnosed, if not treated, can give rise to infection, renal damage and even renal failure. About 30 or 40 years back, out of every 100 patients who were undergoing renal transplant, about 20 to 30 of them were adults whose both kidneys had shut down because they were not diagnosed to have bilateral reflux, which gave rise to parenchymal damage of the kidney, which gave rise to kidney failure, which led to the transplant. So almost 20 to 30% of transplant in the past were because of undiagnosed, untreated or maltreated vesico-urethral reflux.
Child is a small, how a small child will come to the urine?
That is where you need the experts. The child will not tell you. There is no symptom which will tell you, and which is why you have to suspect, investigate, and therefore, because that is the other side of the coin where patients being suspicious for whatever reason, some of it may be justified, some of it may not be justified, that why are you asking for investigations? It is a minor urinary infection. If we tell them do an ultrasound, do an MCU or a micturating cystourethrogram and a radionuclear scan, they start looking at me as though, are you from Mars or where? Why are you asking us to do so many investigations? It's a urinary infection, give Septron or something, child will be alright, forget about it. But when we say this, we are considered as, why is he asking for investigations? I don't understand. And I'll show you actual patients. And the last is obstructive uropathy. If you remember, we had talked about major urological problems in children, where one of them was an obstruction at the junction of the pelvis and the ureter, at the junction of the ureter and the bladder, anywhere where there is obstruction, stagnation of the urine proximal to that, and stagnation gives rise to infection, or minor infection can now spread because there is stagnation. You will never find mosquitoes in a river because it's flowing. It will always be there on lakes where they are static. Same principle. Bacteria cannot proliferate in a running thing. So if the urine is coming from kidney to pelvis, pelvis to ureter, ureter to bladder, bladder to out, there is no time for them to proliferate. Here they come into the kidney, kidney to pelvis, then they are in the pelvis, gradually accumulating, more and more are coming, less and less are going out. They start proliferating, give rise to infection. Infection gives rise to back pressure gives rise to damage, damage gives rise to failure. And this, if it is occurring on both sides, total renal failure. So these are the things which we have to be on the lookout for, and the only way that we can pick it up is when the child is brought to us for urinary infection. Urinary infection, fine. Now let's investigate. And that is why age of 1 year is very, very essential, because if you don't catch it at that time, then your chances of catching it at a later time become less, because you have already ignored it once. You should never ignore urinary infection in a child less than 1 year. And there are guidelines given by the American Association of Urology as well as our Indian Academy of Pediatrics nephrology group as to how we must evaluate a child after treating the urinary infection. And I will tell you that.
So the parents have to take the child to those who are child specialists.
Correct. Correct. And they have to be equally knowledgeable so that they can give the right advice. And which is why
Backtracking is because of some deformity.
it is anatomical. They are born with it. And in fact, most of these conditions, whether reflux, pelviureteric junction obstruction, are being picked up before birth now, which was another lecture which I had given on antenatal diagnosis, where if you do the ultrasound of the fetus, many times you can see dilated kidney, you can see dilated ureter, you can suspect it, so that soon after birth you complete the investigations and you may be able to pick up even before the infection has occurred and start the therapy. We have got a lot of patients, some of whom I will be telling you about now, where they were grossly normal to look at when they were born. They had no urinary infection, they had no complaints, they had no fever, but because we knew about it, because of the prenatal pickup, we completed the investigations, found that there was obstruction in one, reflux in another, everything, and they were treated well in time so that there was no further damage. They are following up today with both kidneys functioning absolutely fine. But this is because we had suspected. But even those where we have not suspected because of the antenatal diagnosis was not done or it was not even attempted, in those cases, small things, but you have to be very careful that you don't miss them. Now again, terminology, I am not going to go in too much detail, but there is simple and complicated urinary. The obvious thing is that complicated means that it is going to give rise to many more complications, whereas a simple one is relatively simple, not that it will not give rise to complication. So if there is low grade fever, less fever, just dysuria, frequency, urgency, think about a urinary infection, get investigations done properly. Complicated means when the fever is above 100. So we always ask, was the fever? No, he was very hot. I said, don't give me very hot. Do you have a thermometer or not? No. I said, buy one. If you have a child in your home, you must have a thermometer at your residence. So don't say his head was feeling hot or he was feeling hot when I touched him. No, that does not mean fever. That does not rule out fever. If he was not feeling hot, there still may be fever. Actually measure it with a thermometer and see whether it is above the arrow or not. If it is above the arrow, fever is there. Then how much is the fever? If you are looking at it in centigrade, 37.4 is the normal. So above 38.5 is considered as bad fever. If there is toxic, the child is toxic, he is not playful, not cheerful, lethargic, just lying around, crying, irritable, vomiting is there. Now the vomiting may be part of the urinary infection and we think that just some food which we have given is causing the child to vomit, but the fever is there. Look at the urine, get the urine tested. There are other tests, I am not saying only do urine. But when the child is brought with fever, think about malaria, dengue, etc. I am not saying no. Think of simple viral fever also, which also could be. It could be fever with cough, cold and a respiratory infection, I agree. But what is the harm in getting one urine examination done? I am sure it doesn't cost more than 100 rupees. It must be less, but not more than 100 rupees. Get a urine examination done. And more so if you are not having cough, cold, fever, if the child does not seem to be having any focus of infection, so what we call as fever of unknown origin, one of the must in these children is get urine examination done. Many times we have picked up a urinary infection in a child brought to us for non-specific fever, no other symptom, just fever. So it could be anything, agreed, it could be anything. But urine examination might give you the pointer and then go ahead from there. Or again there is raised creatinine. These are complicated where you will think about urinary infection and get a renal function test which is creatinine. And you will find the creatinine has gone up. Probably both kidneys are affected already with the complicated one. So be careful about these. See, common organisms is E. coli. E. coli is from the gut. And therefore the highest, commonest chances of infection are from the GI tract. Because the anal opening and the fecal matter contains a lot of E. coli. And therefore direct communication, that's why more in females, that's why common with diarrhea also, that's why common with constipation also, because they pass little bit of stool, that E. coli still remains in the perianal region which migrates anteriorly through the urethra into the bladder, giving rise to E. coli infection. The other ones are there, Klebsiella, Proteus, etc. and nosocomial. This is another thing by which people do not understand. When we tell them, I did one child just now, and for a major surgery where the ureter had to be reimplanted. On third day I said, would you like to go home? And he opened his mouth and said, what? I said, yes, you have a catheter which you are taking care of here. You don't need to be in the hospital, you can go home. So he looked at me and said, are you sure? I said, yes. Because see, what happens is, it's not that I want to show you that I am discharging my patients on day 3. No. The point is, hospital is a place where sick people come. They bring with them sick bacteria. That bacteria is moving around all over the hospital. A child is very, very less immune, easily can be picked up, and the bacteria can invade that child, giving rise to a hospital infection which is far worse than any infection that he or she may get otherwise. Because these bacteria are resistant to most antibiotics, if not all. They are very strong. They can take over the blood system and they can start circulating all over the blood. And once they start circulating all over the blood, which is septicemia, that's when one by one organ starts switching off. The kidney switch off, the liver switches off, the brain switches off, the respiration switches off, and then the child or an adult dies in a septicemia. Which is why we say, why do you want to stay in the hospital unless it's essential? Okay, if we are giving you intravenous antibiotics, if we are giving you intravenous solutions, agreed, you need to stay in the hospital. This child was on oral feeds, was taking medicines orally, only had a catheter and a dressing. I said, go home. They went home. 4 days later they came back, I removed the catheter. Today I have called them to remove the dressing and then he can fly back. He is from Iraq somewhere. So he will be flying back to Iraq tomorrow. I said, fine, no issues. He has got no fever after the surgery. He is passing urine all right now that we have removed the catheter. So why would I want to keep him? And that is the thing. Nosocomial is hospital acquired infection, is the worst type you can give a child. And that's why in most cases I try to tell the parents, please take your child home from here. Whatever you are taking care of him or her here, you will be able to take care at home. If you are not confident, go ahead and stay in the hospital. But if you think that you can manage all these things and give him medicines time to time, why do you want to stay in the hospital? Now, if there is persistence of bacteria, so many things can be possible, all of which are surgical. And therefore, I am not going to take your time and talk to you about individual, but what I am trying to say, that there are lot of surgical causes of urinary infection also, which we need to really look at. Now, with urinary infection, there may be also symptoms which are suggestive of dysfunction in voiding. In voiding means it can be voiding of urine as well as voiding of stools. So therefore, we have to be very careful when we ask these questions whether there were these problems before and they are continuing or they have started now, like incomplete bladder emptying. I had one child, of course child, now he is 14, 16 years. I had operated him at age of 1 year. We had picked up bilateral reflux before birth, waited for 1 year, he developed an infection, so we said we needed to operate you. I had operated him, he was doing fine. He had a severe episode of infection now, so the mother just came running with the child to me. I said, get an ultrasound done. It showed 50 ml of urine after he had passed urine, which means he was not completely emptying the bladder, which means urine was stagnating in the bladder for at least 2 times. Then when I asked him, how often do you pass urine during the day? He says 3-4 times, which normally should be 6 to 7 times. So again, urine is just staying in the bladder static for longer periods, of which only part of it is being evacuated, part of it is still there, which adds to the incoming urine. So all these things are important. Urinary stasis anywhere, and one of the common causes of stone is urinary stasis, whether it is prior to the obstruction or because the child is taking less water and therefore the urine becomes concentrated, therefore it precipitates and therefore gives rise to a stone. So abnormal high urinary tract pressures, like if there is a posterior urethral valve which is like an obstruction in the urethra which does not allow urine to pass, obviously the urine is going to stay in the bladder and therefore it will accumulate, and therefore the back pressure will go up the ureters to both the kidneys. So DMSA scan is a radionuclear scan which is done to look at the parenchyma or the substance of the kidney and its function, whether that is damaged, to what extent, how much percentile, because that gives you exact percentage. If there are 2 kidneys which work at 100%, obviously each kidney should be 50-50. Now in case the one kidney is damaged, then how low from 50 has it gone down? The opposite one will go up by the equal amount, which is not significant. But if the one kidney is showing 30% function and the other one is showing 70%, the 70% is not important. This has gone down from 50 to 30, that is important. So lot of damage on this side kidney is important. Complications of urinary are recurrent infections. They keep on occurring again. Every time they occur, one new renal scar may occur, more than one scar may occur. Blood pressure goes up, hypertension because of damaged kidneys. And of course, if both kidneys are affected and are not properly and treated in time and adequately, you can go into complete renal failure. Now again, presentation is again a big point. As I said, in newborns and in infants where they are not able to vocalize, the parents and the doctor have to look at it. Fever is something which anybody can make out, whether they complain or not. But vomiting, lethargy, simple jaundice, even seizures like epileptic fits can occur in newborns, and that may be the only overt sign of urinary infection. In infants and children, there may be recurrent fever, there may be even diarrhea. That's where the E. coli comes into the urinary infection. Vomiting, abdominal pain, not gaining weight properly, or even constipation. As I said, constipation, E. coli going into the urethral and the urinary tract, giving rise to infection. Older child are able to vocalize much better. They are able to tell you exactly what is happening. Burning while passing urine, urgency, has to run to the bathroom, goes to the bathroom frequently, every 2 hours he has to go and pass urine. Flank pain, the urine may be turbid, foul smelling, yellow. Recent onset of enuresis. Enuresis is complete evacuation during the daytime or at night. And of course constipation. So these are pointers where we have to pick up that this could be a urinary infection. Better we investigate and treat simultaneously. You don't need to wait for the investigation results to come. Again, examination is sometimes important because you will get a lot of indications as to these could be some congenital abnormalities of the urinary tract which we may be able to pick up. Structural problems are there. Whether you see a distended bladder after the child has passed urine, you still find that the bladder is distended. That means either the bladder is not being emptied, or the bladder, because of trying to work against obstruction, has become strong, muscular, and therefore can be palpated, which is not normal in any child. Kidneys may be enlarged and therefore palpated. I did a child about 2 weeks back who had come from Aurangabad, and the child had pelviureteric junction obstruction right from birth. Nobody had realized it because he had not been undergoing an antenatal ultrasound. He came with a lump. That's when they started investigating, found that there was a pelviureteric junction obstruction, and we operated on the child. But the point was, he should have been picked up way before. He was 3 years when I operated him. This should have been done maybe at 3 months, not at 3 years. But unfortunately, they came to us late. Phimosis, again, we talked about this last time when we were talking about inguinal and genital problems in children. Phimosis can give rise to recurrent infection. Labial synecdoche also I had shown you how it looked as though the child had no vaginal orifice only. All it was that it had got stuck in the midline. Once we separated it, the child did fine. But that can give rise to recurrent or single episode of infection. Fecal mass in the colon, that is typical of constipation because the child is not evacuating. Sometimes there may be neurological problems because the bowel and the urinary have got common nerves, have got common muscles which control the evacuation. So if one is affected, the likely possibility that both are affected. So especially in nerve damage like meningomyelocele or a spinal trauma, when they have fallen off and they have hurt their spinal cord, both may be gone. So both will be equally affected badly, and therefore we need to check that also, and whether there has been past operations done in and around the genital and the urinary openings, because of which infection can be transmitted from one system to the other. Biochemical, of course, urine routine, very simple thing like urine routine is not being done for whatever reason. Culture is a different thing because culture, again, many times we get it wrong. Urine culture in a child cannot be collected at home and then sent to the laboratory. That cannot be a culture. Culture has to be given in the laboratory and should be, the process has to be done within half an hour of giving the urine. And even when collecting urine, ideally in a child, especially a small child, it should not be collected like we do it in adults where you are doing passing urine and you collect it. No, that is the third way of doing it. It's not the first. The first way in a child is suprapubic puncture, where we take a syringe and needle, hold the child and just directly plunge it into the bladder and aspirate the urine, which is the most sterile way of taking urine, but invasive, painful, therefore may not be accepted and be willing by the parents. The second best is to put in a catheter into the bladder through the urinary meatus, collect the urine directly and then send it for culture immediately. The third one is what we talk about routinely, where you clean the genitals, pass urine partially and then collect it, midstream sample as they call it. That is the third best. It's not the best. The best is suprapubic puncture. But we rarely do suprapubic, but many times I have collected urine through a catheter and immediately send the parents to give it for culture. Radiological are the main things. Ultrasound for kidneys, ureter, bladder, micturating cystourethrogram, where we insert a tube into the urethra into the bladder, fill with contrast, fill up the bladder, see how the bladder looks, see whether there is reflux into the ureters, see if there are any other anomalies of the bladder. Having done that, we remove the catheter, make the child pass urine. As the child is passing urine, we take another X-ray to see whether the urethra is normal or not, and whether the act of passing of urine causes the reflux, which was not there previously. And last, after the child has passed urine, we take another X-ray to see whether residual urine is still there, because all of this will be seen as white, because the contrast which we have injected is looking white on X-ray. So we can see it, and I will show you some X-rays as to how we can pick up a lot of things. DMSA scan, as I said, is a radionuclear scan. It looks at the function of the kidney, percentile function, as well as the presence or absence of scars. And if there are scars, are there one, multiple, are there in both kidneys, one kidney, whatever it is. And of course, if you need more anatomy to look for congenital anomalies, duplications and all these, then we either do a CT urogram or a MR urogram, which gives much better delineation. Again, pus cells is something which everybody looks at and they get scared because they say pus cells hai. Actually, pus cells is a wrong terminology. It is leukocytes. Basically, what they are looking at is WBC cells. So they are called pus cells, which is, it's a very crude term. Ideally, they should be called leukocytes. So if the leukocytes are up to 5, is perfectly normal. So if there are 4 to 5, the parents get bugged. He says, my son has got infection. I said, no. He said, no, but it is showing 5 pus cells. I said, that's okay. Yes, it is. The criteria are uniform. And if it is more than 10, that's when we start getting worried that no, this is suggestive of infection. And if you are suspecting infection, the next thing you should ask for is a culture. The only problem is the culture takes 72 hours for the reports to come in. And therefore, we don't wait for those 72 hours without an antibiotic. We give an antibiotic which usually works at that age group. And we tell them, once the culture comes, please come and show us the reports. If that same antibiotic which we have started is shown to be sensitive, then we continue the same. But if the antibiotic which we have started is showing resistance, it's not going to act, then we change the antibiotic, not otherwise. And culture also, there are certain specific things. See, I told you, midstream collection is the worst compared to the 3 in children. I am not talking about adults again, please. I only talk about children. Urethral catheterization is the second best, and the best is suprapubic aspiration, and that is what should be done. Now, vesico-urethral reflux is what I am going to talk a little bit more is. This is reflux which is abnormal passage of urine from the bladder into the one or both ureters. And there is what is known as primary and secondary. Primary means where the junction of the ureter and the bladder is abnormal, so it allows bladder urine to go into ureter. Secondary is either there is anomaly or there is distal obstruction like posterior urethral valves. Because there is obstruction, back pressure on the bladder gives rise to back pressure upwards, and that can give rise to reflux on one or both sides. So that is secondary. The reason why we are classifying it is, in secondary you treat the primary cause and the reflux may go away on its own. Like in posterior urethral valves, if there is reflux and we operate and get rid of the valves, then the reflux in almost 1/3 to half of them may disappear without doing anything, because the back pressure has been taken away and the normal. But in primary, the reflux will not just go away. There is a spontaneous resolution, but you need to monitor all these. In whether it is primary or secondary, you need to monitor over a period of years, stretching up to even 5 to 7 years. You cannot just do one, start the treatment and then forget about follow-up. No, they need to follow up on a regular basis. Even asymptomatic, that means children whom you just come across, if you take some 50 students of a class who are absolutely fine, they have no urinary complaints, even in them as high as 18% may be having reflux which has been undetected. They may not have had infection either, but reflux may be there. And those who present, if 100 present with urinary infection, 30 to 50% of them may have reflux. Therefore,
So high.
yes, and that is the reason why we say do not treat urinary infection casually in children. In children, the anywhere between 29 to 50%. These are ranges given because different series have got different percentile. But even in the most conservative one, it is as high as 29%. That is one third of the children who present with urinary infection may be having reflux on one or both sides. It may be one side, it may be both sides, it may be less amount of reflux, but reflux will be there. Females is more. But if you see, males with urinary tract infection are more likely to have reflux than females. And siblings, that means the brothers and sisters of any child who has been detected with reflux should be investigated ideally, because there is a high chance, again 25 to 30% chance of the brothers and sisters being affected with reflux may be asymptomatic. And in offspring also, so once these girls become mothers, or the fathers, the child becomes a father, their sons and daughters also should be looked out for reflux on one or both sides. So it is genetic also to a large extent. See, like this is what I was saying. Normally, you would expect the ureter to open like this, end on. It does not open end on. It has a intramural course, submucosal course, and then it opens inside. So that acts like a flap valve. When the bladder enlarges, the ureter which is in the submucosa gets flattened, and therefore it does not allow urine to come up. When it is being evacuated, it becomes small and again becomes thick. So as the evacuation is done, this again comes to normal. So there is a flap-like mechanism which is one of the things which helps to prevent reflux from occurring. See, in this case there is a massive reflux going all the way up to the kidney. Normally you should not be seeing any of this white dye going up. This dye has been put from below into the bladder and it has gone right up to here. So this is a massive grade reflux which we will be talking about. There is an international classification to know how severe is the reflux. You will say yes, reflux is reflux, but how do you know which is severe and which is... This is the classification for grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Grade 5 is the worst, grade 1 is the least. So you have to be, when you do a micturating cystourethrogram, we always grade the reflux, whether it is grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whether it is right sided, left sided, both sides, whatever it is. So I am not going to teach you the grades, but my point is that these grades are important because they are universal. So even a child who has been done an MCU, I had one girl who had come down from USA, whose parents shifted permanently to Mumbai. So they brought with them the MCU done at that time, which showed bilateral grade 3 reflux. And they said, what do you think should be done? I said, nothing to be done, just now let's observe. She followed up with me. Within 2 years, both the sides reflux had disappeared without surgery. We did one MCU, confirmed that there was no reflux. I said, now no more.
How without surgery?
Because there is a spontaneous resolution which can occur, but that is more likely in grade 1, 2 and maybe 3. 4 theoretically has a spontaneous resolution, which I'll tell you.
Body takes corrective action.
As the child grows, as the maturation of the nerves occur, as the bladder matures, sometimes that flap valve starts coming up in the primary types, not in the secondary types. In the secondary, unless you control the primary problem, the secondary reflux will continue. So therefore these are grade 5 reflux. And what is the effect of untreated reflux is urinary infections can occur, renal scar formation can occur because of parenchymal damage, renal growth, the size of the kidney may also be small. Sometimes you will find a small kidney with massive reflux because of the repeated damage, it has stopped growing. Renal function starts going down, blood pressure goes up, and somatic growth, even the child with bilateral reflux, this won't happen in a unilateral, but both sides reflux, even the child's growth will be less because these are damaged kidneys. Like you have renal rickets, where both the kidneys are affected, stunted growth of the child. So all these things are there, which is why it is important to pick up reflux. And one of the principal methods to pick up reflux is to investigate a urinary tract infection in a child. And that's why we come back to the same principle that urinary infection in a child should be taken very seriously. I do not mean to say that every child is going to come up with something abnormal, but you cannot take it like cough cold and treat it on a outpatient department and forget about it once the child's fever and everything settles down. See, this is what I was talking about, spontaneous resolution. In grade 1 as high as 90% may resolve without any surgery. In grade 2 also it is 75%. Grade 3 is 50%. Grade 4 theoretically is 25%, but we rarely wait for 4 and 5 years with a grade 4 persistent. Unless the grade 4 is come down to grade 3 or grade 2, then we can continue the process of conservative or non-operative therapy. But if not, we don't wait. And grade 5 is 0 to 5%, but I do not believe that it is anywhere near 5%. There is 0% chance of grade 5 spontaneously disappearing over a period of time. Now, these are the things which we look for and ask for from the ultrasonologist when he or she is doing the ultrasound. Please give us these kind of things which are a must to correlate with what we have seen on the micturating cystourethrogram also. The post-void residue, that is the last one which is important, is for the same reason, that whether the child is able to completely evacuate the bladder or not, because if not, then we have to teach the child how to evacuate bladder completely, more frequently, properly, and that can itself bring down the chances of recurrent infections, reflux going down. All these things can be helped, but for that we must know what we are looking for and then therefore tell the parents what they are looking at. See, again, ultrasound can show a lot of things. DMSA, whether it is normal or whether it shows scars, these are the important things. Percentile function and presence or absence of scars, cortical loss and volume of the kidney. If it is one-sided, then compare it with the normal opposite side. So you have a normal side which should be X. Is this X or is it X minus Y? If it is X minus Y, that means the damage has occurred and it has already grown small. Rather than not growing small, this one has grown, this one has not grown. Because all children have small kidneys to start with. The normal one has grown, this one has not grown because it is damaged. So if there is discrepancy in size, know that the damage has occurred on that side. The sensitivity of reflux or ultrasound with DMSA is almost 100%. And therefore doing both makes a lot of sense, and in fact that is one of the guidelines which I will be talking about. See, the treatment of urinary tract infection is immediate, is important, because they have found in 2-3 series where the antibiotic was started after 4 days and within 24 hours, and they have found more damage in kidneys of children who were started with antibiotics 3 to 4 days after their first symptoms. So again you will start saying ki this guy is talking too much, that how can that be such a difference, but in children it makes a difference. So the moment you suspect urinary infection, start antibiotic as early as possible and treat aggressively. Especially complicated urinary infections must be treated very aggressively in terms of immediate, proper dosage, good coverage of that antibiotic, so that most of the common bacteria causing the urinary infection must be covered properly, and to be given for a sufficiently long time. You cannot give 4 days, 5 days and stop. In complicated you go as high as 14 days. and you may have to give intravenous. Once the fever etc. goes away, then switch to oral and continue. And this is where sometimes we also cause problems, because fever goes away, parents are happy, we are happy, they stop the drug after 5-6 days and they say forget it. And then when they come back, we realize it wasn't adequate, we should have given it for a longer period, which we did not, and it has caused. Supportive therapy. See, I told you last time also when I was speaking about urological problems that children are in a hurry, full stop. They want to look at Cartoon Network, they want to look at whatever that CSI or OK, Life OK and CID and all these, and they go and come back in a hurry. They don't take time to pass urine. So therefore we have to train them how to pass urine. Simple thing, as I told you, like if I ask the child, ki when you sit, and now most of the children have got commodes in their home. The old Indian style is almost extinct now. So when you sit on the commode, especially a small child, does your leg reach the ground? The mother says, no, never. So I said, that means it's hanging loose. He said, yes. I said, that is not the right way. You must have support of both the feet when the child is passing urine, especially girls. So if they are hanging loose, then you have to give them a stool below, either one or both, so that both their feet are resting on it when they are passing urine. Sometimes in slightly fat, more than thrust, they are relaxed. The pelvic muscle is relaxed. If you are hanging loose, your muscles are contracting, so you are not thoroughly relaxed, which is why you have to do this. Even in slightly fat girls, I am not talking obese, but fat girls, their thighs are fat. So when they sit on a commode, we tell them specifically, please spread your legs wide. Because what happens is when they pass it the normal way, the thighs come together, part of the urine goes out, part of it goes into the vagina, which is just next door to the urinary opening, and stays in the vagina, and afterwards when they get up, some drops fall off as they are going to their rooms. And what happens is, again, urine accumulates in that vagina, which is a dead space, can get infected, urethral meatus is right next door, goes up. So therefore we either tell them to keep your legs wide and pass urine with foot resting properly, or we tell them, like a boy, go and sit that way, facing the wall, not with your back to the commode. So automatically the legs get spread, and therefore that will not occur, and cleaning and hygiene after they pass urine is as important. More so once they have had a urinary infection, which is what supportive therapy, teaching them importance of evacuating regularly, evacuating completely, evacuating in a relaxed posture. Small things these are, but they are vitally important, very vitally important. Then comes the evaluation. Having treated urinary infection, you say, I have done a great job, and forget about it, will not do. And prevention of recurrent urinary tract infection. What are the problems with recurrence, and therefore treating them is also important. See the immediate. If the age is less than 3 months, or if it is a complicated urinary tract infection, no matter what the age, ideal would be hospitalization, admission. Parenteral, that is intramuscular or ideally intravenous antibiotics to be given. Once the culture report is available, you may need to modify. As I said, 72 hours is the time required from the giving of urine to the actual culture report coming. The culture will give you, one, the organism, number two, it will give you which antibiotic is or is not going to act. Now if it is the same antibiotic which you have already started, you continue with that. If it is a different antibiotic from what you have started, you have to stop that antibiotic, start the antibiotic which it is sensitive to, and then you start your counting. You cannot count those because that was resistant. Intravenous for 3 days, maybe 4 days until the fever goes, and then oral antibiotics. If the age is more than 3 months or it is a simple urinary tract infection, even then oral antibiotic, resolution of fever and the symptoms after 48 to 72 hours, but the thing will continue for a total of 7 days. In complicated or less than 3 months, it will continue for 14 days. You cannot give less than that in a complicated urinary infection or in a child who is less than 3 months. The number of days for intravenous antibiotic may be 2 or 3. It may go to 4 or 5 also, but 2 or 3 should be adequate. But oral antibiotics will continue till day 14 is over. As I said, duration, complicated 10 to 14 days, uncomplicated 8 to 10 days. Prophylaxis should be given in less than 1 year. That means even if you have not detected vesico-urethral reflux, the infection is cured, you continuously give antibiotics to a child who is less than 1 year till all your investigations are done and proved normal. If they are proved normal, you know nothing more needs to be done, withdraw the antibiotic. But if something happens that you find reflux, you find duplication, you find obstruction, then this antibiotic is going to prevent a recurrence which may have occurred moment you stop the antibiotic, because obstruction is continuing, reflux is continuing, but your antibiotic is not, which is not acceptable. Supporting, as I said, adequate hydration, paracetamol, repeat culture if fever persists beyond 72 hours, and no these Flexon and all those type, ibuprofen and all is rarely given in this. And this is what our Indian group has recommended. Any child below the age of 1 year detected to have urinary tract infection, after you treat the infection, you must get all these 3 done. Ultrasound for kidney, ureter, bladder, a micturating cystourethrogram and a DMSA scan. However, if the child is between 1 and 5 years, we only do the ultrasound and the DMSA scan. If both of these are normal, believe me, we have got at least 7 children whose ultrasound was normal. We did the MCU, there was grade 3 reflux. So normal ultrasound does not mean that the child does not have reflux or does not have any problem. So MCU is not a substitute or an alternative to ultrasound, it is complementary or supplementary to ultrasound, especially in a less than 1 year old. Between 1 and 5, if both the ultrasound is normal and the DMSA shows equal good function on both sides, no scars, no cold areas, nothing, then you need not do the MCU. But if any one of the two, ultrasound or DMSA, shows any abnormality, you must get DMSA scan done in these children. Only thing is, in above 5 years, where the chances of kidney damage etc. by a reflux is much less, there you may do only ultrasound. If that is normal, you need not do the DMSA or MCU. But personally, if you ask me, if it is a febrile urinary infection with fever, I would do ultrasound and DMSA in all children above 1 year. That is my personal way of looking at it, because I don't want to take a risk of missing something which I will regret later on. Now this is classical, what we have discussed once before, an obstruction at the pelvis and the ureter, stagnation here. As this grows, the thickness of the parenchyma keeps on decreasing, infection can occur, so we need to operate on this. This is how the ultrasound looks like. We do the DTPA scan. See, for obstruction there is a different renal scan called the DTPA, whereas for function of the kidney itself we have a DMSA scan. So in obstruction suspected, we do a DTPA scan which shows obstruction, for which we need to operate. Surgically, you have to remove the part which is abnormal and join the normal to the normal, and you have done the thing. Prevention of recurrent urinary infections is one general, of course, what I talked about, posture, relaxation, frequency, all these things. See, what happens is, if you ask the parents, they say, No. He never goes to urinate in the school because the bathrooms are smelly. Which means for almost 7 to 8 hours they do not pass urine. Because their school is at least 6 to 7 hours.
This happens for many children.
But that is the problem, and therefore, ideally, this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan should be extended to schools' toilets first. More so in girls. In girls, they have to sit. So the mothers also tell them, don't go and pass urine in the thing. Also on Sundays when they go to malls, they say, no, mall mein bekar hai, nobody looks at the bathroom, so don't go. So they hold on
Yes.
until they go home and then they run to the bathroom to pass.
And that
Again,
becomes a habit.
and that is what I am saying.
They hold on and they drink, there is no water.
That is the problem, and these are the things which we have to teach the children, that you cannot do this, and the parents of course, that you cannot do such things. These habits are bad. Instead of trying to avoid passing urine, try to get the bathroom cleaned in the school. Talk to the parent, the principal and the staff members. See that whatever is the genuine problem, get rid of it. Don't not pass urine. Ideally, you should be passing urine every 3 hourly. Which means I tell them the timetable when they should pass. I said every recess you get, go and pass urine. Don't think how many hours it is. You have 1 or 2 recesses, 1. I said go and pass urine. We have 2 recesses, go and pass twice urine. Doesn't matter. As soon as you go home, first pass urine. Before you leave home for anywhere, pass urine and then leave. Small habits, double micturition at bedtime. Pass urine twice just before bed. Because that's when you are holding the urine for a longest period. So if you have not evacuated your bladder completely just before going to bed, that stagnation remains for 8 hours. Because on an average, nobody gets up at night to pass urine, so they get up in the morning and pass. 8 hours of stagnated urine is there, not freshly made urine which is coming in. Bowel and bladder dysfunction, that's why it is known as BBD, which is a short form. We love short forms because we do hate writing all this in the paper, so we say BBD. So it is bowel bladder dysfunction. That means constipation, bowel as well as is constipation or loose motions, diarrhea because of infection, which can lead to urinary infection. Bladder is if the bladder is overactive, if the bladder is being held back, it becomes so distended sometimes that it becomes what is known as a lazy bladder. The bladder stops contracting because it says, I give up. This child will pass urine when she wants to or when he wants to. So why the hell should I try to keep telling him the bladder is full and contract? So they stop contracting. Then it becomes difficult for them to evacuate the bladder. So this has to be treated on a high priority. Adequate fluid intake, frequent voiding, avoid and treat constipation. That is important. Low pressure volitional complete voiding. Low pressure. You don't have to strain to pass urine. They say, oh, there is residual urine, then put lot of this thing and evacuate your bladder. I said, no, don't do that. Relax and pass urine. See that you do it properly, not in a hurry to get back to watching your TV or whatever it is. Double voiding in select cases and circumcision. See, one of the reasons why we sometimes tell the parents ki if your boy has got reflux and has got an infection already, get a circumcision done from wherever you want, but it may prevent recurrent urinary infection because that is one of the causes where it is much higher in uncircumcised versus circumcised. So get rid of the excess skin and therefore your chances of getting infection which can lead to parenchymal damage may be decreased. It's not that if you don't circumcise you are going to get parenchymal damage, that is not what we say. But given the choice, circumcision would be a good choice in children. Bladder bowel dysfunction, as I told you, is of both bladder as well as bowel. They are both very close to each other. They share common nerves, they share common muscles, sphincter muscles which control their outgoing and incoming everything. And therefore you need to be very careful and very aggressive in treating this bladder bowel dysfunction. Again, holding maneuvers, all these are signs, symptoms which we pick up when these children are brought back as to whether they may need any of these. And you have to evaluate and treat this very aggressively so that you get better results with minimal drugs. We don't like to use drugs just because they are available. So, antibiotic prophylaxis for reflux, again it is a grey zone now. At about 5 years back, the American Urology Association had guidelines which said you should give continuous low dose long term prophylactic antibiotics even though there is no urinary infection. Yes, and we used to give as high as 4 to 5 years, especially in those who are detected at 1 year and all. We continue to give them antibiotics and monitor their urine for infection. Yearly we do an micturating cystourethrogram, yearly we do a DMSA, yearly or more frequently we do blood pressure, urine, serum creatinine, all these things, and we have found that definitely there was a lower incidence of damage. But abroad they now did more series, and the 2005 guidelines which have come up, they are little bit less aggressive in the older children who can vocalize. In those children you need not give continuous antibiotics. If the urine is showing normal, you can stop the antibiotics. But in our circumstances I would be scared, because even after telling them to take antibiotics regularly, parents don't give or the child does not take. So I would give, and watch for all these abnormal signs which would suggest that no, the treatment is not either being effective or the compliance is not good, and therefore then we need to go on to some surgical.
But this prophylaxis is for normal children also?
No, only for those who had reflux.
Reflex.
If we have picked up reflux after a urinary infection, we know it, we start antibiotic prophylaxis. See, this child came with failure to thrive, not eating properly, urinary infection. We got an ultrasound done, it showed this. There was a bubble in the bladder, which was not a bubble, it is a ureterocele, which is the distended end of the ureter, which was opening into the bladder. We got his intravenous urogram, which now we would do a CT urogram because this is an old one. This looks like a cobra head. This is obstruction. Because of obstruction, there was dilatation here, because it was not emptying properly. This is a different one where we do IVPs, we give the contrast to the vein and it comes from above down. So this, while coming down, this was dilated because there was obstruction here, urine was not coming, which was giving rise to infections, which was giving rise to ill health. So we had to cut this from below, from inside only. So we took away the obstruction, waited for some time. Later on we found that this child also had a duplication. He had 2 kidneys on the left side. This is the other one. When we did a micturating cystourethrogram, there was reflux going into the lower kidney. The upper kidney was blocked because that ureter was having, there were 2 ureters, 2 pelvis, 2 kidneys on the left, 1 kidney, 1 pelvis, 1 ureter on the right. So in this, there was one was refluxing, one was obstructing. So we took away the obstruction, waited for 3 months and did a reimplant. That means we reimplanted both the ureters into the bladder. So it took care of the whole problem. This child again, if you see, has duplication on both sides. 2 ureters, 2 pelvis, 2 kidneys on both sides. In this case, there was also an obstruction here. On that side, there was an obstruction there. So we had to do a whole lot of surgeries at intervals to get this child to normal. This was a child who was born in December, picked up before birth to have a duplication. We had picked this up on antenatal ultrasound of the mother when the child was still a fetus. So I can always tell her ki I knew you before birth. Normally you can't make such a statement. But this girl I knew from before birth because she had a duplication here, which after birth there was nothing abnormal to suggest any problem. We did an MCU. This was a reflux into the lower one. The upper one was simply obstructed, therefore dilated. So at the newborn age, at around 1 month, we did one surgery of ureterostomy, At 6 months, we did a double reimplantation because one was obstructed, one was refluxing, and by 1 year we had closed the ureterostomy. Last year she had come down for follow-up. We got the DMSA scan done. The right and left kidneys were 49 and 51%. Now this is not to say that I have done a great job, but we picked it up early, we treated it in time, and therefore we were able to save the kidney and its function.
And slowly kidney function is increasing.
Kidney function will come normal because we have taken away the obstruction, we have taken away the damage which would have occurred if the reflux had not been picked up. And therefore the kidney has grown perfectly equal to the opposite side. Nobody, even you and me, will not have 50-50 exactly. It may be 48-52, it may be 49-51, it can be anything. So this is the importance of antenatal. And another child where we thought we had obstruction on this side, which was there, but we also found obstruction on this UVJ. So there was a PUJ on one side, UVJ on the other. So we had to operate on both the sides at different times to get rid of the obstruction, which was leading to stagnation, leading to urinary infection. So what did the child come to us with? Urinary infection. So we got ultrasound where we saw this was dilated, but we also saw this ureter was dilated. So we got IVP because this was before the CT urogram was there. We found obstruction on left side, obstruction on the right side. We operated one after the other. See, this was that ureter which was thick, broad, and then it was narrowing here. And this was the obstruction. So we had to excise this and reimplant this into the bladder. So we make a similar tunnel. That's what I am saying. That is the one which prevents reflux. A tunnel which should be 5 times the diameter of the ureter. So if the ureter is 5 millimeters, you need 25 millimeters of tunnel through which it passes. So if the ureter is dilated, it is 50 millimeters, you need 50 into 5, that is 250 millimeters of tunnel. Therefore, dilated ureters cannot be reimplanted, should not be reimplanted. And this was after we had fixed it at the new ureteral orifice. Then there was another guy who had partial duplication. He was a 7-year-old boy, pain, fever, and redness in the flank. What we did was ultrasound and an IVP. You can see this, it has duplication. This was dilated like crazy, this wasn't. Beyond this, we could not make out whether there was 1 or 2 ureters. In this boy, both the ureters joined at one point, but there was obstruction at the PU junction on the lower end, and which had caused stagnation, which had got infected, which had given the fever and the redness. So we waited with intravenous antibiotics 14 days, as I said, of complicated urinary tract infection treatment, got the infection under control, and then we went in and we operated. See, this is the dilated pelvis of the lower, this is the ureter coming from lower, this is the ureter coming from the upper one, which we did not do. Ultimately these two ureters joined together to form one ureter, but we had to take care of this obstruction here, and therefore we did a pyeloplasty. Or a 3-year-old girl with pain, dysuria, mild fever, again non-specific symptoms. Symptoms are not going to tell you the diagnosis, but when we did the IVP, again you saw duplication there, complete duplication with reflux. So these were the 2 ureters on one side. Normally there should have been 1 on each side. These were the 2 when they were cut, and then they were reimplanted into the bladder with a thing. Or this boy who was 10 years or 11 years came with dysuria, difficulty in passing urine, straining to pass urine. So when we did an ultrasound, this was the bladder which found, but there was another structure sitting behind the bladder, which when we did the micturating cystourethrogram, we passed a catheter and filled up the bladder. This started filling up. There was a huge diverticulum which was opening into the bladder, which was like 2 bladders. So when he passed this urine, then this diverticulum emptied it into the bladder. So he had that sitting here, till the next time he went and passed urine. And that gave rise to difficulty in passing urine, urinary infection, pus in the urine, which we had to take care of, and then we had to go in, and this was the opening from inside the bladder where it was going out, and we had to remove that whole thing and then get rid of it. Sometimes for reflux they do endoscopic, people will talk to you about endoscopic injection. They give an injection which prevents the reflux and they say it is as good. Personally, I have done at least 5 or 6 patients who have been injected, but the reflux continued. And then they came to me and I said, I don't believe in injection, I believe in regular open surgery, because I know open surgery has got a 98% success rate. Whereas this, the overall success rate, depending on the grade, is so bad. So I don't want to say much because I don't personally believe in this injection which is supposed to give great results. And this overall success of 46% is after giving in some grade 4 and 4, 5, sometimes 3 and sometimes 4 injection. Each injection, the vial itself costs 20,000 rupees. Plus doing the procedure under general anesthesia, 1 day stay, everything category wise comes to the same as open surgery. Open surgery is a one stage. This may require more than one injection. Each time the cost will go up with no guarantee.
After giving the injection,
The reflux stops.
no, but how it stops? Surgery you will do
That frankly, when I asked some of these people, they were not able to answer me as to exactly how it stops. So therefore I was not convinced of the principle, because you are not,
Normality will remain.
the principle has not been effectively bypassed. That means you are not increasing the length, you are not increasing the tunnel, you are not doing anything. So I don't know how it is supposed to be acting, and neither were they very sure as to how it does act.
But there must be some theory, no?
There is a theory saying that you raise the fold so it becomes like a valve and therefore the reflux stops. But if you see this, see, most of their series is a follow-up of 1 year. These people, one in Journal of Urology as late as 2010, they did more than 1 year of follow-up, and they found that overall only 46% had success, which means 54% failed, and therefore had to undergo either a repeat injections, or ultimately they got fed up, so we went in for operative. And these are the indications for reflux. Either the patient, if they are staying in a village, they are not going to be compliant, they are not going to follow up, then we give them that, okay, let's operate and then you can go to your village and stick. See, these are the Vadia type patients where they don't have money to come back, do an MCU yearly, do a DMSA yearly, get urine done every 7 days for 3 weeks, then 3 weeks for another 1 month, then monthly. So they say, no, you just do whatever has to be done. We say, okay, then let us operate and then you can go home. That is one. Girls who have reflux in spite of reaching puberty, because during pregnancy, if you have not done it, they can have problems of reflux with infection, where antibiotics are ideally contraindicated in the first 3 months of pregnancy. So we fix them at that time. Or if there is lack of somatic growth. From infection point of view, if the antibiotics are continuous and they get what is known as a breakthrough infection, in spite of antibiotic they get infection, we operate. Persistent or recurrent infection, that means your antibiotics are not having proper effect, go ahead and operate. Grade 4 or 5 reflux on an average will not spontaneously go away, so no point in wasting time and waiting. If new scar comes or an old scar increases in size, obviously the damage is ongoing. There is no point in waiting because your treatment does not seem to be working. And if there is any associated anomaly. Surgical options are various. We usually go through the thing now. This is what I am saying, sometimes how frustrating it is. This guy was 6-year-old, painful micturition, frequency of micturition. He had undescended testes which we fixed is alright. But because of this, we did an ultrasound which showed a left hydroureteronephrosis, thin cortex. That means the kidney was already thinned out on that side. When we did a maculating cystoarthrogram, grade 4 reflux on left side. and the DMSA scan was showing 21% function on the left, which means it was showing some 79% on the opposite side, which is not great, but this was 21. So we operated him in stages. We did a repeat VCU, no reflux, but when we did a DMSA at 1 year, the function was still 21, which means 6 years with multiple episodes probably of infection caused by the reflux had damaged his kidney irreversibly. So in spite of all our surgeries, this was the same child. Massive reflux pre-operatively. This was the dilated ureter on ultrasound. This was the MCU after doing the surgery. There is no reflux on either side. But the kidney function never improved beyond 21%. This was again bilateral reflux. This was an open bladder. This is the catheter coming from the penis. So this is the bladder outlet. These are the two ureteral openings. So we go from inside the bladder, go around this and bring it in. The whole ureter we dissect out. This was one ureter, this was the other ureter. Then we make a tunnel for each ureter separately, bring it out through that and then fix it. So these are the two new tunnels made and now they are fixed here, and that's how we do the anti-reflux surgery. This was the child who showed bilateral reflux pre-operatively, as you can see, and post-operative after the surgery was done, as I said, more than 95% success of no reflux. And if now there is no reflux, even if you do it after 5 years, there will not be any reflux. Okay, so I think my point is that we need to be very, very careful and very proper follow-up needs to be done in order to give better results. We may miss something major if we do not investigate thoroughly a urinary infection in a child. More so if the child is less than 1 year. Less but still significant between 1 to 5. Above 5, maybe you will be able to take things a little bit more casually, but I would not take urinary infection in a child casually at any point.
Thank you.